It was a typical day in the courtroom, but the tension was palpable. The judge sat at the front, his stern face set in concentration as he looked over the case files. The sound of papers flipping echoed in the silence. In the middle of the room, Robert De Niro sat quietly. His eyes scanned the courtroom, calm, composed and seemingly unfazed by the drama unfolding around him. The air was thick with anticipation. Everyone knew this wasn't going to be a normal trial. On one side, there was De Niro, an actor who was used to being in the spotlight. On the other, the lawyer. He had built a reputation for being ruthless, known for his sharp tongue and quick wit. His confidence was undeniable. The lawyer had already made a name for himself in the courtroom, intimidating witnesses and opponents alike. But today, his target was someone no one could have predicted. Robert De Niro, and the crowd was waiting to see what would happen next. The judge called the case to order, and the lawyer stood. He adjusted his tie, a smirk crossing his face as he turned towards De Niro. The drama was about to unfold, and the courtroom was filled with a mix of curiosity and excitement. The lawyer stepped forward with a swagger, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom. He knew how to command attention, and he loved it. His eyes were locked on Robert De Niro, the actor sitting across from him. The smirk on his face was impossible to ignore, as he began his attack. "You know," the lawyer started, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "I've seen you in movies, tough guy, right? But sitting here in this courtroom, you look a little out of place." His words hung in the air, the entire courtroom holding its breath. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of how to react. Was this really happening? A lawyer, mocking a Hollywood legend in front of a judge, a room full of strangers, and the whole world watching. His tone was cruel, but he was in control, or at least, that's how it seemed. The lawyer didn't stop there. He went on, weaving in comments about De Niro's career, his age, even his past roles. He made it clear that he believed the actor was nothing more than a washed-up star. Each word was like a sharp knife, aimed directly at De Niro's pride. "You've spent your life pretending to be someone else. But here, in this courtroom, you're just a man like any other," the lawyer continued, the crowd's unease growing. There were some nervous glances exchanged between people in the room. Was this going too far? The ruthless lawyer was enjoying every moment, confident that he was winning. He had made De Niro the target, and for now, it seemed like he was in complete control. But what the lawyer didn't know was that he had just set the stage for something far bigger than he could ever have imagined. Robert De Niro didn't flinch. His face remained calm, his expression unreadable. He sat there, still as a statue, while the lawyer continued with his insults. There were no visible signs of anger, no clenched fists, nothing that suggested the actor was bothered by the lawyer's words. To the untrained eye, it seemed like De Niro wasn't affected at all. But the longer the lawyer spoke, the more the tension grew. The courtroom was buzzing, whispers running through the audience. Everyone was waiting for De Niro to react. Was he going to snap? Would he stand up and throw an insult back at the lawyer? Or would he stay silent and let the lawyer dig his own hole? The lawyer's words grew sharper, more personal. He continued to mock De Niro's past roles, even making jabs about the actor's personal life. The laughter from the courtroom was quiet but evident. The lawyer was in his element. He was on top, but De Niro still didn't react. His fingers twitched lightly, but that was it. His eyes never left the lawyer, but there was no sign of the fury that everyone expected. It was almost as if he was observing the lawyer with detached amusement. His silence was almost more powerful than any angry outburst could have been. The lawyer continued to taunt him, growing bolder with each passing second. But De Niro remained composed. The actor's calmness seemed to make the lawyer's mockery feel more childish, like a bully who had finally met someone who wouldn't respond to his taunts. It was clear now. De Niro wasn't reacting because he didn't need to. He knew something that the lawyer didn't. The tension in the air wasn't just about the insults anymore. The entire courtroom was beginning to sense that something big was about to happen. De Niro's calmness was unsettling. It was as if he were waiting for the perfect moment to strike back, and everyone in the room could feel it. And then, it happened. De Niro finally spoke, but not in the way anyone had expected. The lawyer, growing more confident with every passing moment, launched into yet another mocking remark, this time aimed at De Niro's age. He paused, waiting for a reaction, expecting the actor to crack, maybe even explode in anger. But De Niro simply cleared his throat. The room fell into an almost eerie silence. Everyone was watching him, waiting. The actor's voice, when it came, was soft, controlled, yet cutting in its simplicity. I've spent my whole career playing characters, but you're playing a role right now too. De Niro said, his words slow but steady. There was no fire in his voice, no hint of aggression. It was calm, almost chilling. The lawyer paused, his smirk faltered, just for a split second. He hadn't expected this. De Niro wasn't angry, wasn't defensive, instead he was simply stating a truth. The lawyer was pretending to be someone he wasn't, a ruthless, untouchable figure in the courtroom. But De Niro could see through the act. There was a brief moment where the lawyer tried to laugh it off, but even he couldn't mask the unease that had crept into his voice. De Niro's words had landed. The courtroom could feel it shift, the balance of power beginning to tilt ever so slightly. De Niro stood up. It was a small move, but it was enough to make everyone sit up straighter. His eyes never left the lawyer, and the room was so quiet now you could hear a pin drop. I don't need to pretend. I've lived more lives on screen than you'll ever have in reality. De Niro continued, his voice gaining strength. There was no more hesitation, no more softness. This wasn't a man who was angry, this was a man who had decided it was time to end the charade. For the first time, the ruthless lawyer looked uncertain. The power he had felt earlier, when he was mocking De Niro, now felt like it was slipping through his fingers. The smirk faded completely. He was no longer in control, and then, just as quickly as he had stood, De Niro sat down again, folding his arms across his chest. His posture was relaxed, almost nonchalant, as if the entire exchange had been effortless. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, but De Niro remained calm. It was clear, he had turned the tables, and no one had seen it coming. The lawyer stood frozen for a moment. His confidence had been shattered, his mind raced, trying to find the right words to respond, but nothing came. He had been so sure of himself, just moments before, mocking De Niro, pushing him into a corner. But now, faced with this unexpected calm, the lawyer seemed to lose his footing. The audience could sense the shift. What had been a courtroom of tension and mockery now felt like a room of quiet disbelief. The lawyer's smirk, once a symbol of his power, had completely disappeared. His jaw tightened, and his eyes flickered nervously between De Niro and the judge. He had been expecting a reaction, a burst of anger, a flustered defense, but instead he had gotten the exact opposite, a calm, measured response that left him struggling for words. Trying to regain control, the lawyer cleared his throat, and took a step forward. But it wasn't the same, the authority in his voice had been replaced with a hint of doubt. "You think this is some kind of game, De Niro?" he asked, his tone shaky, as if unsure of what he was even asking anymore. But De Niro didn't respond, he just leaned back in his chair, watching the lawyer with an almost amused expression. It was a look that said everything without saying a word. De Niro knew that the lawyer had already lost. The judge, who had been silently observing the exchange, finally spoke, his voice cutting through the thick tension. "Enough, counsel," he said sternly, his eyes narrowing. The courtroom fell silent once more as the lawyer stood there, flustered, realizing he had made a critical mistake. He had underestimated the man sitting across from him. De Niro, still calm, just sat there. His expression unreadable. It wasn't anger or fear he was showing. It was the quiet confidence of someone who had been through far worse, and had nothing left to prove. The lawyer, now on the defensive, tried to save face, but everyone in the room could see it. He was rattled. The once vicious attorney was now just a man who had been bested by someone he never expected to outplay him. The power had shifted, and the ruthless lawyer no longer seemed so untouchable. The atmosphere in the courtroom had completely changed. What had started as a battle of wits, a game of power between the ruthless lawyer and the Hollywood legend, now felt like something entirely different. The energy in the room was charged with an uneasy tension. The lawyer's earlier bravado was gone, replaced by an unmistakable air of vulnerability. The judge, who had been a silent observer up until now, looked at the lawyer with a new sense of disapproval. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the room, then settled on Niro. There was a flicker of respect in the judge's gaze, a silent acknowledgement of what had just happened. The courtroom was buzzing with whispers. The lawyer's confident, almost arrogant tone had been silenced, and everyone could see it. The people who had once felt uneasy about Niro's presence in the room now seemed to understand him. He wasn't just a famous actor, he was someone who knew how to stand his ground, even in the face of mockery and ridicule. Niro's calm demeanor had shifted the power dynamics in ways no one could have predicted. It wasn't just that he had withstood the lawyer's attacks, it was how he had done it. He had turned the lawyer's own words against him, without raising his voice, without losing his cool. The ruthless lawyer was no longer in control of the room. The whispers grew louder, and even the judge seemed to be quietly reconsidering his view of the situation. The lawyer, once so sure of himself, now looked like a man who had been caught in his own trap. The audience in the courtroom could feel the shift, a growing sense that this trial wasn't going to play out as anyone had expected. And through it all, Robert De Niro remained silent, his expression unchanged. He had made his point. And in doing so he had won more than just the court's attention. He had shown everyone in that room what real strength looked like. The trial didn't end right then, but the atmosphere had already shifted. The ruthless lawyer, once so full of arrogance, now found himself scrambling to regain control. His attempts to rally the room fell flat. Every word he spoke seemed weaker, less convincing. The courtroom, which had once hung on his every insult, now seemed to turn against him. De Niro, on the other hand, remained the picture of composure. His words had done the damage, but it was his silence afterward that left the greatest impact. The lawyer's mockery had been met not with anger or defensiveness, but with calm confidence, a quiet confidence that had dismantled the lawyer's entire strategy. Outside the courtroom, the media was already buzzing with the story. Headlines were filled with reports of the courtroom drama. Ruthless lawyer falls flat after mocking Robert De Niro became a trending topic. The lawyer's reputation, built on his sharp tongue and brutal tactics, was now under scrutiny. People couldn't stop talking about how a Hollywood actor had shown the lawyer just how out of place his arrogance had been. In the following days, the case seemed to take a back seat. The courtroom drama had overshadowed the legal proceedings themselves. The focus shifted from the case at hand to the real drama, how one man had managed to silence his opponent with nothing more than a few well-chosen words. The lawyer, once the feared figure in the courtroom, was now seen in a new light. His reputation had taken a significant hit. People began questioning whether his ruthless approach had finally caught up to him. Had he gone too far? Had he underestimated De Niro, not just as an actor but as a person? Meanwhile, Robert De Niro remained unfazed by the attention. He wasn't looking for validation or applause. He had simply done what needed to be done. His actions spoke louder than any words could. And for the lawyer, he would have to live with the consequences of underestimating someone who was far more than the character he had mocked.